Let's jump in. We're talking about everything I know about designing a sales process. And that's a little bit of a clickbaity title. It's not going to be everything. I know we got 20 minutes here, 30 minutes, but I'm going to give you a lot of insight into designing out what your sales process looks like from someone booked a meeting to their paying customer. That's what we're really going to talk about. For those of you, who are new, and you're probably wondering, like, who is this guy? Let me give you a quick rundown of who I am. I sometimes forget that usually it's 50-50 new people and a repeat, and I sometimes forget that. And I start off like I did now, as if you guys were all like my friends, which you are, by the way. You're here. You're my friends. All right, cool. This is me. I've lost a lot of weight since this, by the way. I think I'm down close to 70 pounds, something like that. So anyway, shout out me. But a couple of things. I've worked with, it's actually over 80 software and service companies. And really my work is around building a repeatable sales process beyond just the selling itself. So SDRs, how many calls should they be making, scripts, how do you track the SDR performance, a whole bunch of stuff like that. I'll actually give you, if we have time, I'll show you a little sneak peek of something I'm working on that's related to SDR performance, and we're doing this for AE performance too. For those of you who are repeats, I hired a developer about 2 months ago, maybe 2.5 months ago now. We've been working on something. I might give you a little sneak peek. We'll see. Okay. Second thing here is I've written 3 Amazon best-selling books. One is on cold outreach. That's called Cold to Committed. The other is on kind of building sales development functions, which is called the Sales Development Framework. And then the most recent one is called 16 Steps to Repeatable Sales. It's about how to build a repeatable sales process. The all of them, you can just type my name in on Amazon, you'll find them. I've also helped our clients sell over 100 million in software and services. I would say probably about 70% of our client, maybe it's like 60, it's around there, of our clients historically have been software companies. So we do software and service. Over 280 million in money raised. About 30% of our client base has been venture backed, and they've gone on to raise money since working with us. And I've personally trained over 1,000 salespeople. I've also been a rep. I started my career as an SDR. I have been in the account executive role. I've run teams. I've built teams from scratch. Been all around the block when it comes to sales organizations. And one of my missions here, and why I do these live classes, is because I want to provide you with the best possible education around building a sales function that I can. I think it helps you build a better business. I also think it's more important now than ever before that we're much more thoughtful about how we're building our sales teams. People are a little bit stricter when they're buying, right? They've tightened up the pocketbooks. I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking at my Amex bill, maybe a little bit more than I normally do. And it really takes talented salespeople to build a strong, repeatable sales process. And in fact, with technology, you probably need less salespeople today than you ever have, which is pretty cool. We won't be talking too much about that, but there is one major problem that we're going to be talking about, which, actually, I think I have 3 here. The first problem that you may experience is lack of consistency across reps. So in the chat right now, if you can tell me how many sales reps do you have, or if you're the one doing the selling. So if you're the one doing the selling, say myself, if you have sales reps, give me the number of how many you have. What you'll find over time, especially as you hire sales reps and you add to your team or you remove yourself from selling, what you'll find is that across sales reps, often some perform well, some of them don't. Okay. It looks like here, I'm looking at the chat, it's a lot of folks who do the selling themselves, which is great. And that's good for me to know because I'm going to make sure I cover this for you because there's some things that you do a little bit different when you're the one selling versus when you have a team. Perfect. So you have one, you do some selling, you have 2 others. Perfect. Okay, great. This is good to see. So I'm gonna tailor this a little bit more to people who are still really hands-on in the sales process, which is awesome. This most of the companies that I work with are at that stage where they're doing it themselves or just starting to try and transition to having a team help. And then Javier has 10. Okay, great. Good to know. I'll cover stuff for you too as well with larger teams as this goes across both. But okay, so the first problem that you see, and Javier, you might run into this, which is, hey, I have 10 reps. Some of them are good. Some of them are definitely not good. What do we do, right? And you want to create some consistency across reps. There's performance consistency. To solve that, you really need data. And the only way you can collect data that's actually useful is by having operational consistency. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Next here is that processes change all of the time. And for those of you who are doing the sales yourself, you might already know this because you're like, oh, sometimes I sell it like this, sometimes I sell it like that, and just kind of all works out. You have like the founder close rate magic or whatever. Great. That's totally fine. As you get sales reps, you realize, oh, shoot, I actually need to like have some systems here, have some messaging here that they could use. Once you get to that point, it's like, oh my gosh, we're just changing processes all the time because I don't actually know what works well consistently. Okay, so it's tied to the last one. And then finally, and I touched on this a second ago, no data to actually optimize the process. This is a really important piece of the equation here. If you're not doing things consistently, we can't really rely on that data, right? That's really what I want for everybody here. That goes for if you have a team of 10 or if you have a team of you. We need to collect data to understand our process as a process versus, hey, I'm really charming and I can close some deals here and there. Okay. That's what I want for you. There's a big opportunity here. When you do this right, it creates this link between what actions we take and the results we generate. That's the link I want. Okay. But it also allows you to make much more data-driven decisions. And the reps know what they have to do to be successful. And for those of you who are doing the sales yourself today, and actually I'm going to ask you this question. For those of you who are doing the sales yourself today, how long in months, how long before you say, you know what, I'm going to hire my first salespeople? How long? Give me the months. Because when you get to that point, you are going to want to be able to say to that salesperson, hey, this is what you do to be successful. Okay, that's the punchline here. And the reps knowing that is really, really important. Okay, so for example, 3 months, like this should be pretty dialed, right? You want to know what steps of your sales process are. It might be why you're on this call. You're like, hey, I need to really put some clarity around our sales process because I'm going to hire these people. Okay, 3 months away, like you got a lot of work to do, right? We want to get there. 3 to 6 months here. Okay, perfect. So you get the idea. We want a process that we're handing off to people to do, not hiring the people to figure out the process. We will refine the process. It's like, it'd be crazy for me to say to you, like, all right, create your repeatable sales process and hand it to the sales rep when they start. And you're like, dude, I don't even know how we get deals really. People know me from my network or whatever, right? Like there's always going to be an element of this, but you need some kind of foundation. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. All righty. So let me give you a quick promise, and then we're going to jump into some principles here. And then I'm going to walk through the framework I like to use. Here's my promise. By the end of this, you will have a framework to map out exactly what has to happen to get a deal done. Step by step, critical. And this matters if you have a really transactional sale. So like closing in a couple days, 7 days maybe, or if you have a really complicated sale and you're like, hey, I'm lucky to get a deal in 9 months, 18 months, right? Doesn't matter. You need to have this process kind of mapped out. Okay. 3 core principles that I want to cover. The first thing when it comes to this sales process and all the different deal stages along the way, it must be really objective. And what I mean by that is there is no debate whether a deal should be in this stage of your sales process or not. And when I say stage, I mean discovery, demo, evaluation, technical review, proposal review, whatever your stages are. You can call them whatever you want. We'll go through that in a minute, but it's got to be objective. It means this. So for example, here's the most common not objective way I see this happen. Our first deal stage is discovery. Our second deal stage is demo. One of our reps moves the deal from deal stage 1, which is discovery, to demo, which is deal stage 2. They move the deal once the other person has completed the discovery. Then rep number 2 moves the deal when the demo is scheduled on the calendar. Well, that's 2 totally different things, right? One is, hey, I did the discovery. I think they're going to go to demo, but it's not scheduled yet. The other is, oh, they scheduled the demo. I moved it over. Tells you 2 different things, right? The second rep If their drop off between deal stage 1 and deal stage 2 is really high, it's because people aren't showing up to the demo that they scheduled. For the first sales rep who's just moving it afterwards, you actually don't know, is it a show up rate issue? Are they not showing up to the meeting that they scheduled? Or are they just not booking the meeting? So they say, hey, let's do this over email. And they go back and forth and they're just not able to get the meeting on the calendar. It's one of those two things. Which one? You don't know, right? So that's why it's so important that we have same definitions across everybody. The next thing here is it needs to be flexible. We cannot force our sales process onto the buyer. We can educate the buyer on our sales process and take them through our sales process, but we can't ignore their buying process. This definitely matters when you sell more expensive software. So actually, if you can type into the comments, just the pricing range of how much your service, your average deal size, just give me your average deal size. And however you track that, whether it's just 1 year or you're doing your MRR, then put MRR after it. If it's ARR, put ARR after it. If it's like a service, that's a one-time cost. Just give me your average deal size. The larger your average deal size, typically the more complex the sale is, which means the process is going to look slightly different for each one of the prospects that you're working. So we need to be able to support that, right? So we must be flexible. And then the next thing here is it must be measurable. We have to be able to measure the drop-offs, like I mentioned earlier, between stages. We really, really need to measure the drop-offs between stages. So for example here, look, 1,000 in MRR, 700-ish in MRR, perfect. These aren't, like, you're still on the transactional side, right? When you're talking about 10K-ish a year, you're still more on the transactional side, but sometimes it's more common to have a second meeting with someone versus if it's $6,000 a year, then you're probably closing on one call, right? So like right here, 10 to 100 annual. I'm assuming that's 1,000 annual, but correct me if I'm wrong. So you guys get the idea here. Like if you have if the cost is smaller, typically the decision isn't as big. The bigger the decision, the longer, more complex the deal can take. There's a couple of exceptions to here, right? Like, so Taylor says I have a one-time service of 30K. Okay, that can still be pretty transactional. Okay, just depending on what it is, right? So understanding that is important. We're going to walk through that right now. What I want you to take away from the measurability portion here is that when you have well-defined stages in your sales process, you can measure the drop-off between stages and it gives you a place to focus. And we're going to talk about this in depth in a minute, but I just want you to have a summary of what we're about to go through. All right, buckle up. Here we go. This is something I call the sales process designer. I will give you like a digital copy of this. Don't let me forget, though. I will forget. Okay, I'm going to give you a link to the survey. You're going to do the survey because you really want to give back to me and my community. But you're going to do the survey to make me happy. That'll be great. And then I'm going to give you this, but I often forget. So during the Q&A, just because I'm usually rattling off answers to questions, please remind me to give this to you, and I will. All right. So the sales process designer. What this does is it splits up your sales process into deal stages, exit criteria, and then meetings. Okay, we're going to go through deal stages first. Then the little boxes are the meetings, by the way. Spoiler alert. Okay, deal stages, couple of things. They are really important for getting information from your sales process and quickly identifying bottlenecks. This is what I was talking about before. One of the annoying things is having a win rate drop. Okay, and for transactional sales, even when you do this right, it's sometimes difficult because you don't know why it's dropping. Now, typically, if you're like a one-call close, you know it's on call. Something's happening on call. It's something the rep is doing that isn't right? Well, it usually always results in, it always boils down to the rep doing something that wasn't right. But it's a lot easier when you have a one-call close because then you're just looking at that one call and figuring out why, where did we go wrong here? When you have a lot of different possible steps, especially with more complex sales processes, it can be really difficult to figure out where the bottleneck actually is. And like, hey, our close rate isn't where I want it to be, but you don't really know why it's not. Okay, so deal stages are really important for getting information. Many sales organizations that I've seen keep their deal stages super ambiguous. So for example, they'll use general stages like demo, close won, close lost. Like that'll be it. This is a big issue because you're not actually getting information that you need to improve the sales process. So let's say you have the demo stage, and let's say there's 3 meetings that you normally do in order to close a deal. There's a demo itself, and then usually there's a follow-up call, maybe a second demo with some other stakeholders, and then there's a proposal review call where you ask for the business. If you just go demo to close won, close lost, you have no idea which one of those is broken. Okay, that's what I really want you to take away here. Also, these deal stages should represent your actual sales cycle. This is why you shouldn't just use whatever's defaulted in HubSpot. So what I'm going to ask you to do here first is decide on how many stages you need and write out which deal stages makes the most sense for you. That's the first step here. Let me start giving you some examples, and we're moving a bit into meetings here. So you're not going to, you'll see like the meetings, I'll reference them here, but I'm going to explain how to do meetings in a second. So here's an example of a mid-market sale. Price is not always a good way to determine if it's a mid-market sale or not. It's more on complexity of the sale. Should I tell that story? No, I'll skip that story. Okay, so right here in this example, we have a discovery call. So hey, I booked a meeting. We do a discovery call to make sure this is a good fit. Then we move into a demonstration where we actually walk through our product. And then the next one is evaluating, where we actually evaluate if it makes sense for us to use a solution or not. They might have an internal meeting. Maybe you're talking through a proof of concept, whatever it might be. So here's an example for a mid-market sale. Each one of these stages has different things that go on during them. That's the key here. They're very natural next steps. Demonstration, you can see 2 fuzzy squares there that are pink. Those 2 fuzzy squares represent 2 different things that may have to happen. One might be optional, one might be mandatory. They both might be mandatory. It's up to you to figure that out. So let's talk about meetings here. Meetings are the things that take place, the meetings that take place within each stage. So really what I want you to do is know what possible range of meeting types would you need to do in order to close a deal. It might not be required for every deal, but you need to understand it. It allows you to match your sales process to your buyer's buying process. And this is important. Just because we sell in a certain way doesn't mean someone buys that way. So we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of their needs and our understanding of all possible needs, so we can sort of like Lego block it together. That's the idea. Official term, Lego blocking. Another thing that this does, by knowing the meetings per stage, it helps you understand roughly the capacity of your sales team. For example, let's say there's 4 possible meetings that take place in the evaluation stage. 4 meetings that take place. Maybe 2 of them are optional, 2 of them are mandatory. You have a sales rep with 12 deals in the evaluating stage. You know they're probably working a lot on active deals, right? But if you have another sales rep that has all their deals in demo phase, there's only 1 possible meeting in demo stage, you know that they probably have more bandwidth, right? More capacity. All right. So for each deal stage, and I'll give you an option. This is choose your own adventure story, because I've met some people who like to do it the other way. For each deal stage, have a list of the possible meetings that could take place in that deal stage. Not every buyer is going to require every one of those meetings, but you should know that they are a possibility. You mark them as optional. So 2 ways to do this. Way 1 is how I just described. Let's write out your different deal stages, and then let's build out what meetings take place in those stages. That's how I like to do it, because it helps me stay really defined at a macro level of what's happening in the sales process overall. Some people think in the reverse. They think wrong. No, I'm joking. They think reverse. And they're like, hey, can I just write out all of the meetings, start grouping them together, and then giving them the stage names after? That's fine too. I don't care how we get to the same outcome here. Just make sure that you have an understanding of what the different stages in a sale are, and then what meetings are required within each one of those stages. Okay, so what does this look like? Let's go to that mid-market example that we already talked about. We have a discovery call in the discovery stage. That makes perfect sense, right? Then there's the demonstration. in the demonstration stage, we have a product demo and we also have a technical review. Maybe in this company, they want you to meet with IT and make sure that this isn't going to interfere with anything else that they have. Maybe they don't require that and you would make that an optional one. Maybe they all require it. Maybe you require it, right? So that's like an important thing to know. And then you do those meetings. And we'll get to like why these meeting things are important in a minute. And then evaluating, maybe there's a pricing call, a proposal call, or something like that. Maybe they just started a trial, right? So if you sell with trials, maybe they started a trial. Okay, that's how you do it. Now, when you have these stages and you have the different meetings that take place within the stages, we need to move to the next step, which is define when a deal moves from one to the other. In sales world, we call this exit criteria. What criteria is required to exit one stage and go into another? So every deal stage needs that criteria because you don't want, like I said earlier, one rep doing one thing and another rep doing the other. Okay, it's just going to mess up all of your data. So good exit criteria follow some simple rules here. The first, they are objective. They are not open to interpretation. Here's one that sometimes happens. We'll have deal stage 1, deal stage 2, and the sales rep will kind of pick if it makes sense to add someone to deal stage 2. I'm not sure if this is that good of one. I don't know how likely this deal is to close. So they don't move it into deal stage 2 until they do like another meeting with them. Why would a rep do this? Usually that's because their close rate is tracked on deal stage 2 to close, not deal stage 1 to close. So they're like, I don't know if I want to like add this in and have my close rate drop, because then my manager's going to be like, why'd your close rate drop? So that's a main reason why. There's a couple of other things there too. It's also why I don't like obsessing over close rate. I think it's an important metric, but I don't like, for example, like I've met people who they have close rate expectations for their sales reps. And depending on how you track that close rate, that could be more damaging than it is. So like, for example, I have a client who's their close rate, like she's trying to get her close rate up naturally. I think everyone is. She's trying to get her close rate up, and she has one sales rep and one SDR. She's trying to get her close rate up, and she's just like, hey, Kyle, help me get the close rate up. The close rate got to be up. The close rate got to be up. I'm like, all right, let's work on the close rate. And then finally I go, hey, wait a minute. Can I ask how many of your qualification calls, which is like a 15-minute call to make sure that they qualify, how many of those qualification calls, what percentage of them are moving on to the next step? And it was low. It was like 20% or something. I'm like, really? 70%, or yeah, I guess it was 30%. Yeah, so 70% of your deals are dropping off from the qual call. They're disqualified. That seems high to me. She's like, yeah, now that you say it is kind of high. So then we looked at what determines qualification. She had some extra stuff in there that I wasn't like super thrilled about. And I'm like, look, here's what I'd prefer to do. Your sales rep isn't slammed right now. Like, let's reduce our qualifications a little bit. We actually might hit on the close rate. Like, we might lose a little close rate, but your volume is going to go up and your rep has the bandwidth. Let's just see how this math works out. And funny enough, both the volume and the close rate have both gone up. So, hey, that's either because that's how that worked in this one situation, or that I'm a genius. You take your pick on which one it is. All right, number 2, they are required. All must be satisfied in order to move on. A little asterisk here for the optional ones. It would be if required, then it's required to be done before it gets moved on. If it wasn't an option that they had, then you get the idea. Okay, then they are followed. No deal can move stages without it. It's really, really important. I hate stage skipping, by the way. Hate stage skipping. In fact, I make rare exceptions to this, but if I'm looking at somebody's sales process and I feel like there's a stage that because of how it is defined, I could see a sales rep going like, oh, that wasn't really necessary, so I'm skipping it. I'll make them rebuild their sales process. I don't like them skipping. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. You look at your different stages. You look at the meetings required in stages. If there's other things like a mutual action plan that isn't a meeting, all of that stuff you put in exit criteria. So an example here might be to get from deal stage 1, which is discovery, to deal stage 2, which is demonstration. Discovery call was conducted, demo scheduled, underline, scheduled, demo scheduled. Why am I saying that a lot? The most common thing I see is the sales rep asks for the next step to be scheduled. The person replies saying, sure, shoot me an email and we'll schedule it. And they move the deal stage and it never gets scheduled because the person was too nice to say, I hate what you're trying to sell me. Or whatever. Maybe that's a bit strong. You get the idea. It's so important that we have a clear definition here. We hold the team accountable to it. Then exit criteria from demo to evaluating. Demonstration conducted. Technical review conducted if needed. Prospect indicates that your solution meets their needs. And then next step is, say it with me now, scheduled. Good job. And then finally, exit criteria from evaluating is a contract is signed. That means they're moving to close one. And I guess they said no would be they go to close loss. That's how it works. Let me give you a couple examples here. And then I'm going to start transitioning to Q&A. So SMB, you can see very short. Demonstration evaluating. Sometimes it's just a demo and you're closing on that demo. Great. Mid-market, I'm not going to go over that one again. This is the example that we've been using. And then enterprise. So if you have more of an enterprise sale, you can see a lot more meetings take place. So if you have a deal in the evaluating stage, we might have 2 different group reviews going on, workshops, mutual action plans that you're doing with them, like a meeting to actually build out the mutual action plan. You might do that even earlier, right? Like you can see how these things can get pretty intense. That's the idea here. They all have clear exit criteria. So why does this all work? A couple of things. It covers all of the important areas of building a repeatable sales process, which is the sale itself, right? It's really critical that you understand how your sales takes place. It makes it easy to identify gaps. Like I mentioned, when you have a drop off between stage 1 and stage 2, you know something needs to be fixed in stage 1. If you have a drop off in stage 4 before stage 5, you know that it's probably something that's going on in one of the meetings in stage 4. This is really helpful because you know where to focus. Versus if you have 3 different deal stages and your win rate isn't where you want it to be and you don't know why because you don't have the different drop off stages, you're guessing. You might change something in the script for the first call, not really fully understanding that that's not the problem. The problem is something else, right? That's the key here. And then it forces you to actually build a process. And ultimately, that's where I want you all to live, in process land. Let's build a process together. So then that way you have something that you're measuring and you're iterating over time. And for all of you doing the sales yourself, this is why I recommend you do this, because you follow the process. You know your numbers. So when you finally hire that rep and they start, you can look at their performance in following the same process that you were following and your performance. And you can ask yourself, how do I get them closer to where I was? Or, holy crap, they're much better at that part of it than I was. Maybe there's this other area we need to focus on. That's ultimately the objective. All right, let's move into Q&A. Before I start answering questions, type in your question now. I'm going to scroll to the top of the chat in a minute and see if anybody asked a question while I was talking. But before we actually do that, please fill out this survey. This survey, just so you know what it is, I do a live class every week. I might be dialing it down to every 2 weeks, by the way, and then just being a little bit more. I might change the process a little bit. So for those of you who've been around a long time, you might see it go to every 2 weeks. Not sure yet. I'm going to test it. But okay, this survey, what is it? This isn't a sales thing. I'm not going to start trying to get you to buy something from me. The survey gives me feedback on the live class, and that feedback helps me make these better. I work really hard to try to bring you topics that you can take and actually use the next day. That's the key here. Notice I didn't spend a lot of time talking about theory. Sure, I told a fun little story about meeting a really well-known entrepreneur yesterday. But other than that, you got some pretty dense content stuff. I do this on purpose because I want to provide as much value to you as I possibly can. Okay. This survey helps me make sure that I'm living up to that promise. It's really, really helpful for me, and it allows me to improve these. Please fill it out if you're here, if you're listening, if you're multitasking. It takes a minute. Please fill that out. That would be awesome. All righty. Let's jump into questions. Okay. Only one. Wow. how would you implement upskilling / field enablement practices as part of refining the process? Okay, great question. And I'm just going to kind of like bundle this into like coaching and training stuff. A couple of things. Actually, this is a good, maybe I will show you this thing. Okay, I'm going to show you guys something and give you an example. But give me 1 second. So to answer your question, as you have the numbers from all of this stuff that I just mentioned, when you have the numbers, then you can identify where they're struggling specifically. So for example, let's say they're struggling getting people from the discovery to the demo. Okay, we'll use that. We stuck to that example. If that's the case, okay, let's go listen to the discovery calls and see what's happening. And then you give them training based on where they're actually falling through. So that would be like for a sales rep. This is a good time to show you something. So let me load this up and then I'm going to share my screen again. So that would be an example. Let's say there's some big drop off in like a later stage, like where's a kind of a common one? Let's actually just say it's after the demo. This is pretty common. It's after the demo. The drop off rate is super high from demo to close loss. And you might even go, hey, we didn't even talk about this. This is more of like the next level. You might look at your close loss reasons, right? Either way, you end up uncovering, either by listening to calls or looking at close loss reason, that there was another decision maker involved and we couldn't get them involved after the demo. It sort of fell off from that point. Now you know, hey, we need to get some commitment from the prospect that we're talking to that they're going to pull in the main decision maker. So a way you might do that is in the very beginning of the call, in the upfront contract, you will ask them like, hey, at the end of this call, or you would say like, hey, so typically when I talk to people like you solving these kind of problems, they want a person like this to take a look at it as well because they have a bit of a different perspective. Or I found it really helpful to have people like this involved because they have a different perspective and I can kind of show them a demo. If this checks all of your boxes, are you open to scheduling a time for me and so to actually walk through this as well? Yes, I am. Okay, great. Let's jump into the demo. That would be the idea. Okay. If real quick, everyone who's on here, if you can type in, do you have SDRs at all? Do you have anybody who's like cold calling, doing any sort of cold outreach? Just type yes or no. All right. Another question here. What should training look like? Frequency. So there's a couple of things. Like if you're not doing it at all, I would recommend at least doing it once a week. Like if let's say you have let's just say like you aren't that much of an expert. You need to hire somebody to train your team. Like at least get them training once a week, right? It's not crazy expensive. Like we have a service where we do this and we come in and we train SDRs or AE once a week. We look at their metrics. So like at least do something like that. But if you have enough to like be able to coach them and train them, great. I would recommend doing 2 to 3 times per week. What should it look like? Call listenings are great. I love live feedback. So if you had a manager, 70% of their time should be listening to calls and giving them feedback live while they're doing their calls. So live feedback is probably my favorite. The highest tier, not super feasible unless you have a manager whose whole job is to do that. The second thing is call reviews. I love listening to calls and giving feedback. This is super impactful. The third one is actual topics. So for example, earlier today, I was coaching some SDRs around just asking for meetings because the data showed that they were struggling when they were in a conversation to actually booking a meeting. So we talked about how the best way to transition into asking for the meeting. These are the types of things that you're looking at, and you're doing actual training topics on those things. So those are like the 3 main ones that we do. Also peer stuff. You can also do role playing. I love role playing too. Typically I will put role playing in like the training category, but role playing is really useful. Okay, so I look at the SDR thing. Only 2 people replied, which is shocking because there's a good amount of people on here. No and yes, so we're 50-50. I'm just going to take this as representative of everybody. Speaking of representative, if you could fill out my survey, that would be super awesome because it'll help me better understand you and what you care about and what you thought about this. All right, cool. Let me show you guys something. I have not showed this yet. This is what I was telling you earlier. I hired a developer like 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago, something like that. And we've been working on some stuff, a ton of AI stuff that I'm not going to show you. It's really sweet though. It's very, very cool. When I show you, your brains are going to melt. You're going to be like, oh, this is incredible. But I'm going to show you some of the data stuff that we're doing because I think it's pretty cool. And then Taylor, I'll answer your question. Okay, so check this out. Really, really sweet. This is the tool that we built. It's called Yasu, which means hello in Greek. This is an internal tool. Okay, so don't ask me for this. I'm not going to give it to you because I can't. It's just for internal use. Maybe one day, but not anytime soon. We can select the different reps so you can see all of the reps' performance. And we're pulling this out of the CRM. You can see the number of calls that they make, number of connects, number of meetings booked, the dial to connect rate, connect to meeting booked rate, and dial to meeting booked rate. Okay. So right here, if you look, if they make 100 cold calls, they book a little over 2 meetings. It's pretty good, by the way. A lot of you would love to have this number. Most of the people on this call, if you're doing cold calling, I'm sure are like in the 0.5s. Maybe you're in the 1%. That's like nice. Like if you can get to 1%, that's really good. So anyway, really strong numbers there. And then here's the connect performance. And this is where like, this is a little bit of like the secret sauce. What we're doing here is we're looking at the calls and we're determining how many of them were like instant hangups. So you connected with somebody, but they hung up on you. How many times were you able to say the actual intro? How many times did you actually have a conversation? And how many times did you actually book a meeting? And I get percentages here. So percentage to hang up, about 5% of their calls are, 5% of the people that they talk to hang up on them really quick. 83% of the people that answer the phone, they actually are able to get through their whole intro. That's pretty high. Their intro is doing well. Intro to conversations, or the percentage of intros that they say that result in a conversation, is 61%. Not too bad. And the conversation to meeting percent is 15%. So this is just giving me some insight into their connect performance. And then we're looking at engagement trends. So let's just do week over week, and let's go to let's look at their conversation to meeting rate, and let's see how that's changed over time. So it used to be really high. This also could have been a partial week or something because we just rolled this out. So I'm going to ignore the first week. 12.8, then drop down to 5, 16, 15, 14 is flattening out. You see that? Wow, pretty interesting, right? That's super cool to see. And can we raise this number, right? Possibly. Like if I saw this and I felt this was real, I just think this is a data issue because I think we uploaded half a week for this particular one and we should just remove it, but it's there. If they were hovering around the 5.8s and then they had a couple weeks where they were in the 15, 16s, I'd go, okay. And then they fell back down to like the 6%. So I'm like, oh, geez, how do we make this the consistent, right? That's what you're looking at. Another thing you might do is you might go, hey, what's our connect to conversation percentage? So of the connects that we have, right, which our connect rate is 29% or 30%, let's call it. What's the connect to meeting? So we connect to actually getting the meeting done. And you can see like pretty high here, and then you can play around with the numbers. You can look at it. Sorry, this is connect to convo, not connect to meeting. I was misspeaking. I was wondering why that number was so high. This is so of the people that you connect with, what percentage of them have a conversation? And then you look and you go, okay, well, what about meetings booked? And then you look at meetings booked here too. And you can go, interesting, like as the connect to conversation goes down, meeting booked, like they kind of collide with each other. That's interesting. Why is that? You can ask these questions, right? Spoiler alert, that's what I would expect. And then we can also see weekly comparisons. And this is all part of answering a really important question, which is what do I coach the rep on? No one does this, just to be clear. What they go is you're like, oh, let's work on the cold call script. Let's work on overcoming objections. They don't let the data tell them what they need to do. So if I go here and I go, hey, what's your connect to intro percentage, where you connect with somebody, you get through the entire intro. I might even throw it up here and go, okay, what's the connect to intro percentage? And I'm going to get rid of these two just to make it easy for me to see. Gosh, it used to be, probably bad data, but it used to be like in the 90s, which is crazy. And for this company, it makes sense, by the way, but this is very uncommon. This wouldn't make sense for you. And then big drop off. Why? Did we change the lead list? Are we calling different kind of leads? Like what's going on? This is at 90, you see? And I can look at connect to intro rate and I can see the percentage change. I can start seeing trends, week over week trends, and go like, gosh, we've just been dropping, a little spike, dropping, a little spike. What's going on? So to go back to the question, if I'm trying to figure out somebody's performance, I might look at their connect to conversation rate and go, hey, this has just been dropping like a rock. We're not getting into conversations like we used to. That's the problem. Let's work on that. I might go to connect to meeting rate and see what's happening there. And this tells me what could possibly be going on. Okay, so I wanted to walk through this to help answer that question. You can also look at, your different call outcomes and whatnot, but also just to kind of show it, because this is something that we're using a lot internally in order to answer some really important questions for SDRs and then for AEs as well. And that's where that stage by stage drop off comes into play. So can I share a couple of examples of how to go from conversation to asking for a meeting? Oh, okay. This is for the cold calling thing that I mentioned earlier. Taylor, if you're still here, do you mean on a cold call how to transition from having the conversation with the person to asking for the meeting? Or do you mean in a sales call at the end there? And then I'm going to answer Rish's question here, and then I'll get back to you. Would you happen to know what are the industry averages for conversion rates? Okay, Taylor, gotcha, cool. Okay, industry averages for conversion rates. Depends on what conversion rates you mean. Industry averages are kind of nonsense. So I just showed you somebody's metrics where like 90% of people answered the phone. There's no industry average for that. Like, that's insane, right? That's crazy. So it really, really depends. I'll just give you a couple of quick ones here, just so you understand it. And then Taylor, I'm going to go to your question. Okay. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Dial to connect rate. I'll go cold call, and then I'll kind of sales process. I can't give you any. There's no industry averages. Like the percentages of calls that go from deal stage 1 to deal stage 2, like the average is irrelevant to you, because your deal stage 1 and deal stage 2 are two very different things. But I'll give you some of like the cold call ones, just some general things to have in your head, like win rates and stuff. So for cold calls, if you call a cold list, it's generally going to be around 5% dial to connect rate. That's the one I'm most confident giving you. When it comes to like connect to meeting booked rate, generally I'm seeing around on the lower end, 5 to 7%. Generally, I want that in double digits. I want that at 10. If you are not well known as a brand in the space, probably 14, 10 to 14 is where you want to land ish. What ultimately matters is what does it have to be for your math to work out, but we can talk about that later. And then if you're really well known, that could be 20, 25%. That's for a connect to meeting booked. Show up rates are all over the board. Typically very transactional sales into the SMB. Your show up rate is worse. You might be in the 60s. Sometimes they're way worse than that, which is, you're working to get it fixed. If you're selling into mid-market and enterprise, generally that's a bit higher. That's when you'll see it in the upper 70s, mid 80s. Win rates. More transactional sales in the software world will typically fall like the 30-40% range. In the services, you generally see that get above 50. So if you're in like the 60% range, that's pretty good. That's that. And then, more mid-market sales, you see that kind of drop. Like I want it to be in the 25 range. And then for more enterprise sales, generally I'll see that drop even a little bit more. And I'd want to see us in the 15s. Okay. And I just kind of given you a bunch of random ones. Hopefully, it was helpful. Okay, good. If you have like a specific scenario you want to shoot me, I can try to tell you what I think that number should be. But I almost like intuit it. I just kind of look at it and go like, I've worked with so many companies. I just kind of think it should be this, which isn't a science, but hey, what are you going to do? Okay. A couple of examples of going from convo to asking for a meeting in cold calls. Give me a second here. Let me see if I can share my iPad. I really wish. I don't think I can. Bummer. I would draw this out. Okay, I'm just going to answer the question directly. Yeah, I can. Okay. How to go from the transition from the conversation on a cold call to asking for a meeting. So here's what I generally do is I have the ask section start with a recap. So you're in a conversation, you understand their current state, their ideal state, where they want to be, and what things they've tried and what's been holding them back, why it's important to them. You have a normal conversation. Then you start with a recap. So you say like, all right, so what I've heard so far is that you've hired sales reps before in the past. They haven't quite worked out all that well. You're prepared to hire another 2, and you really want to make sure that you do your best to get this sales process up and running so you don't have to keep going through this cycle of hiring sales reps and firing them because they never end up getting their footing. I might even pause and say, like, is that a fair summary? Yeah, it is. Okay, great. Now, here's the key. Why don't we do this? That's my favorite line. Why don't we do this? It's soft. It's very empathetic. Why don't we do this? Let's set aside a time. I'll walk you through how we've helped other organizations build out their initial sales process. So that way you're much more likely to have these new sales reps that you hire work out this time. So recap, why don't we do this? Set aside some time to do whatever you say you're going to do. Why don't we do this? Set aside that time. How does tomorrow at 10 a.m. work for you? Super simple. That is a very direct ask. How about tomorrow at 10 a.m. for you? That's aggressive, right? So because that's so aggressive, you might be thinking like, oh, this is going to be like a little too assumptive. It feels so natural when you say, why don't we do this? That's why it's my favorite part of it. Why don't we do this? Let's set aside time to do. How does tomorrow at 10 o'clock work for you? So that's how I do it. Hopefully that was helpful. It was good. Thank you, Taylor. I love when you guys give me feedback. Oh, if you haven't done my survey, please. It's the only thing I ask for. All right, David. Sorry, I thought I did do not serve. Okay, here we go. What are 2 to 3 common key metrics that you've experienced make the biggest difference in sales process? I know it can vary. Just curious if you've seen some trends. Yes, a couple of things. Key metrics. I'm going to be a little liberal with the use of the term metrics. The first is deal stage 1 to deal stage 2 drop off. A really, really big lever to pull usually, just because you get more volume, right? So that's a big one. The other one, when I said like being loose with metrics, this is what I mean. The other one is distribution of close lost reasons. This is big. If you're not tracking close lost reasons very well, I recommend you start. Close lost reason is really important to figure out why we're actually losing when we lose. And you should be very thoughtful. You can't just have lost to a competitor. You need like lost to a competitor. Why? Because they were cheaper than us? Because they had a feature we didn't have? Like, why did we actually lose, right? So a distribution of close loss reason tells us a lot. So those are the 2 big ones that I look at. We look at, I should pull up my list. We just went through this the other day for our AE dashboard, but sales, time and stage, that's another big one. Time and stage. So how long is it typically in this stage? Obviously your sales cycle length, the total length. Time and stage is a pretty critical one too, because what I find is sales reps will hold on to deals too long. And I actually want to flush those deals out. I want, if someone says call me back in 3 months, that's out. Close lost, reason, whatever. It's close lost, and you're going to reach out in 3 months, try to reactivate that deal, right? That's kind of stuff I try to be strict on. Look at all these questions. Hopefully that was helpful. I want to keep going through. I have to jump pretty soon, so I'm going to go through some other questions. But if you have a follow-up, just let me know. Those are a couple ones for you. Deal stage 1 to 2 is convo to demo, right? No. Well, okay, it could be. It could be discovery conversation, if that's what you mean. So discovery to demo is typically what it is. But sometimes you do the demo on the first call. So it could be like demo to trial setup or demo to evaluation, whatever that might be. Okay, cool. Rob, what do you got? Do you see any success with SDRs leaving voicemails without having contact with the prospect? Even with having contact with the prospect, I have not seen a lot of success here. Doesn't mean you won't see it. Like, it might be worth testing out. I would do like one test where you do a whole bunch of those and then just see if you book the meeting. Oh, geez. Can you guys still hear me? I think my camera just died because my plug stopped working right before this. I thought I had enough battery. Okay, well, can you hear me still? Okay, I see. Yes. So I think, oh, no. Was that? I think that is yes. Okay, cool. All right. Well, this is hilarious. You don't get to see me anymore. I will answer your questions in the dark. So anyway, yeah, in terms of success with SDRs leaving voicemails without having any contact with the prospect, totally dependent on you. So give it a try. Let me know how it goes. Generally, no is the answer to your question. All righty. Well, if you haven't done the survey, please do the survey. No need to mention my screen going dark. No need to talk about technical difficulties. Come on, give me a little bit of break. I really appreciate your time. You can't see me, but know that I really do. There's a lot you can be doing on Thursday. You're spending it with me. If you want to see the other classes that we're doing, Voris.com/events. I'll give you the link to this. a lot of questions on cold calling. So before you jump off, I will tell you on June 5th, I'm doing like a cold calling masterclass as a live class. It's probably going to be more content than I normally do in one session, just to go deep and nerdy into cold calling. So I just posted the link to that, voris.com/events. You could register for it. If you have any questions at all, never hesitate to reach out. Oh, yes, Rob, I was going to send the digital copy. Ooh, people who left early got in trouble. Sales process designer. See, I told you guys, I always forget designer, which is like on me, but I'm a one-man band. I have a lot of stuff to keep track of, by the way. All right, I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. This might be one that I used. I don't want to yeah, this is fine. This one I think has a little extra in there that you're not going to need, but it'll give you all the stuff you need at least. Okay, cool. Great. Well, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. If you have any questions at all, never hesitate to reach out. You know the website. You got the survey. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Bye.